great weekend. Washington football team beat San Francisco 49ers. And we did it in pretty special fashion. Like, I don't remember the last time I watched a football game with 2 pick sixes. Well, I watched it where the other team had 2 pick sixes on my team, but we had 2 pick sixes, and our defense pretty much won the game. So that was spectacular. But I hope you had a great weekend too. And this week is significant. It's the final week of the Art of Peace. We have been practicing one stanza of the Art of Peace every weekday since July, 23 weeks, which is like almost 6 months. So, it's been half the year. It's been the pandemic year. I guess we're going to still be in the pandemic in 2021, but with the vaccines on their way, it would seem that we'll lick this vaccine, or we'll lick this virus pretty quick. Who knows? But anyway, it's been a heck of a year. And it's appropriate that I would have, picked this time to study the practice. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I am sure that my participation in this format, where I'm, training online, et cetera, that'll take place moving forward. And using the Art of Peace as a teachable thing every year, that may make sense. So, all goes well. We'll do this again next year. We'll practice it through. So today is the 110th stanza. The 110th stanza reads, "The divine does not like to be shut up in a building. The divine likes to be out in the open. It is right here in this very body. Each one of us is a miniature universe, a living shrine." So the basic assumption is that inside of us is this element that is divine. And I understand that. I get that, and I see that, and I experience that, especially when I'm interacting with love. For example, when my children, yesterday I saw Liliana, and they had both been given hot chocolate, and just thinking about it just makes my heart just like want to burst. Liliana's got this hot chocolate. She's running around the house. The hot chocolate is very hot chocolatey, and she and her sister have been drinking it for a long time. But she's running around, and she's got her cup, and she's got hot chocolate all over her face, and it's like she's clearly been tipping it back and just taking as big gulps as she could take. I mean, she's 4, so she's taking as big gulps as she could take. So she's got this line of hot chocolate like across her face, and I see her, and she's just like got this big grin on her face. She's like, and inside of me, this warmth and this light and this lift came out. It just came out. It wasn't a language. It wasn't talking. It wasn't anything. It just, this aspect of me just came out. So that's one example of what this means, why the divine is within us. So that's an example. Now, another example of something that just comes out is not the same kind of thing, but there's similar experience to it, and it's worth pointing out to know the difference. So another instance was I saw a post from someone who I have kind of been on the path with. We started on the path at the same time. Right around, this person was one of the first people I ever kind of interacted with in a professional capacity. And oftentimes I've seen this person's work online. And while I value this person's work a lot and really have learned a lot from this person, I also find that I'm very jealous. And I'll see this person having success and I'll compare that success to myself. And I will oftentimes feel jealous. And so what will happen is I'll see it and a feeling, okay, will come up in me, kind of a dim, a darkness, a kind of an uncomfortable feeling, um, just kind of like a jealous feeling, right? That comes up too. And so the question is, what's the difference between the two? They're both kind of showing up inside. One is showing up around, this love experience, this light experience. The other is showing up around this kind of feeling of jealousy. Both of the internal environment, both showed up at a kind of a moment's notice. What's the difference? So the difference is what story kind of created it, or what story is kind of attached to it. Because what's showing up is when the stuff from my daughter showed up, there was no story behind it. There was just this kind of lift and up. When the other experience, the jealous experience, showed up, there was a kind of a sink in and a story. There was this story about how that's not really that good, or that's this, or that's that. Both came from the inside. One is clearly the ego, one is clearly divine. The question I have for myself mostly as I'm working this through is, what's the difference in terms of the source? And the best way I can understand the source is, I had an experience the other day where I was with the children, with my wife, we were watching TV, there was screen sounds, there was all this stuff going on. I'm sorry, that's the wrong story. I was exercising and I was wearing headphones, and so I had music in my head, and I realized I had started exercising before I had created my little mindful moment to start. So I had the sound going in my headphones. I was in kind of a yogic pose or whatever, and the sound was really loud. And as the sound was pretty loud, I said to myself, all right, we got to go back to do the start thing. The start was a mantra, so it was just a kind of a prayer. So while the sound was going really, really loud in my head, I looked up and I did my mantra. And so I felt my mantra pushing through the sound. So there was all this sound, all this noise, and I was pushing this through. I kept kind of pushing this through. So there's an aspect of me, right? Me, Ben, kind of pushing this through, this, all this sound, all this stuff, Ben using Ben's will to push through. So Ben's will, right? Pushing through. Seeing Liliana, seeing her like joy and happiness and that big smile, and having this come out of me, was not Ben's will. The difference between insight and ego is Ben's will, or Ben's kind of self, Ben's ego, is a layer that sits on top of this divine element. Like, the divine element is not Ben. Ben gets to interact with the divine element, but the divine element's not Ben. Ben is the story of the ego. Ben is the experience, the past, the future, the narrative, the story. It sits on top of this piece right here, right? that little piece right here, ego sits right on top of it. So what happens is these layers, right? These other layers rest on top of this divine piece. And I think the first layer is Ben's will. And what happens over time and over practice is I think the will becomes further and further enmeshed with the divine. It's a choice. The divine's always there, but the choice to mesh it with the will, I think, is something that you have to do yourself. Like, this is something you've really got to work with. So anyway, I read this stanza. I read the 110th stanza. I think it was 3 years. I think it was 3 years ago. It was back when I was in DC. And when I got to this stanza, I had the same kind of experience where I was kind of exploring jealousy, exploring, another relationship or another experience where Armor Down should have evolved faster, or Armor Down should have been this, or it should have been that, or should have been this. And so I remembered that experience, and I listened to it again before I did this one. And what I've noticed, what's changed, is that the ego narrative, the jealousy narrative, the am I doing the right thing narrative, it's still very big. It's not gone. It's not like I'm no longer comparing myself. It's not like my ego's disappeared and all there is just this divine base, right? What's happening is that the experience of the layers, right? The layers of self are still very much there, but they're more and more transparent. I've said this before. They're more and more transparent. We study this when we sit, which is you see your thoughts, but instead of them being like really thick, taking up your whole spectrum, they're much more spread out. They have a lot more transparency. You can see through them. Well, that's kind of what's happening now. They're still there. There's still comparison. There's still identification. There's still story. But there's just not the power behind it. And because there's less power behind it, there's more tapping into this divine element. And it's becoming less kind of, it's just becoming more clear. It's more clear that there is something divine within me. I interact with it more. I offer gratitude for it more. I express it as compassion more. I see my being more as a conduit for it, as opposed to my identity as a conduit for myself. And so then the question arises, well, how do you continue to kind of live that? And I think the answer to that lies in the way life is participating with you. And the other stanzas that'll come this week talk a little bit more about that. But I think there's something about the way life just shows up, and in particular shows up through challenge. For example, I have a new opportunity on my plate that, showed up in a way that I never would have imagined before. I never would have thought this would be this way. But sure enough, there's an opportunity. And it just came out of nowhere. It didn't completely come out of nowhere. It came from the cultivation of a relationship around goodwill. But the opportunity came out of nowhere. And there's an element to that kind of I perceive as beyond my own ego, right? So beyond the things that I'm trying to control or that I have to control, this showed up independent of that. And because of that, there seems to be an element of the divine. So the divine at large, not the piece of the divine that's within me. The divine at large works with the macro divine works with the micro, right? So the macro story, the macro divinity, like the universe, works with the micro, which is the mini universe, right? So the big universe, mini universe. And there's a correlation between how accessible that space is to you and how you access it. And the last thing I'll say is where mindfulness comes in is mindfulness is the lens with which you look at all this stuff. And so part of the reason why my ego has become less loud, quieter, is because I've just looked at it so many times. I've looked at it so many times through the lens of mindfulness that it's just so obvious what it is. So even in yesterday, even though it's obvious and even though it's full of body, there was several experiences yesterday where I was in a kind of a excited state on the inside, and it was very excited. Like it was very, very full. And instead of giving it anything, I just kind of let it be there. Just literally just sat with the fullness of it. Just let it be there, and it eventually went away. Uh, and so what the mindfulness does is it really just makes this makes all these experiences um, far more accessible because there's not as many layers. Typically, all these experiences have lots and lots of layers, and as soon as they have layers, they have story, and as soon as they have story, they have past and future, and then that becomes life narrative. And once that turns into like your life narrative, and you get into the oh, woe is me, or oh, this is great, I'm the greatest, or one thing or the other, then they take on a life of themselves, and that's where habits form, and that's where deep-seated beliefs form, and then you got to unpack all that stuff. Well, now there's just not that much there. It's big. I feel it. I see it. I recognize it, but it just doesn't hold up very well because I'm not giving my attention to it. So anyway, let's get to the training. Again, the training itself is meant to tap into the divine by the very nature of taming the mind, getting into the body, creating an interaction that calms everything down, and then putting out compassion and gratitude. The idea of tapping into the best version of yourself a little bit to start your day. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll try to point out what I'm talking about further, especially when we get to fourth bell. So with that, go ahead and follow your cues to comfort, get yourself squared away, and we'll get the training going. Get you out of here in a couple minutes. So I've got rain sounds. Focus on that. I felt a hold in my core. I let that go. Touch, temperature, left side of the face. Temperature, bottom right foot, close to the space heater. Not much by way of smell. Increasing cold. I feel that everywhere. I feel the cold. It's like it's like a blanket of tingly feelings all over my back. The side away from the space heater. Not much taste in the mouth, pretty empty. I have a little bit of a song from the movie Annie in my head. Dum dum, why are you so dumb dumb? Dun, 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 dun. So that's playing. It's bottom right. It's so interesting that when I have songs in my head, it shows up in the what I envision as the bottom right quadrant of my mind. But everything's mostly quiet. So like there's no story in my head. There's no ego. The will is quiet. The will is just kind of holding the practice. And if I look down, I would say the divine element is just quiet. There's just emptiness. Remember, if you don't understand emptiness, you'll never understand the art of peace. There's just emptiness. Nothing, none of the parts that make up the whole of my being are really that actively engaged at the moment. So that's bell one. Okay, so that's the goal of bell one, is to create this tamed environment. Okay, now let's go into bell two. So bell two adds a little bit of will, right? So you've quieted the mind, you've quieted the narrative. Everything's kind of in a state of beginning quietness. So now we engage the will. So now it's sending attention. Your will is what sends your attention to these different parts. So first, starting with the ground. So you send your attention, your will sends your attention to what's connected to the ground. Now you can complement your attention with thought. The thought of what's beneath me all the way down to the ground. So you kind of ground the story, ground the experience with the thought of being connected to the ground, then drop thought and go back into feel itself. So the feel now includes inside. So before it was kind of the exploration of the outer world, taming the mind that way. Now it's exploring the inside, kind of giving your mind something to do, which is study the sensation. So your will, okay, your will puts your attention into a particular place, and you use your thinking mind to kind of feel what's being felt and whether you should do anything about it. So if you're counterbalanced, or if you're excuse me, if you're not balanced, if you're not balanced, how do you balance? And so you're asking your body for information, and your body's giving you information, and you're processing that information. And so right now, I'm attempting to kind of explore the experience of my pelvis, noticing my pelvis, but I'm a little bit pulled away from my body because I swallowed spit down the wrong pipe. So while I'm trying to stay focused on the core region or the pelvic region, I've got this little feeling in my throat, this little itch, right? So it's pulling my attention away. So what I have to keep doing is bringing my attention back to my goal, which is to now move up my spine. So it's a distraction. The body in this moment is a distraction, as well as my point of focus. So my will is kind of staying focused, staying present, not getting pulled away, because it knows, and my memories know, that what happened, this little distraction, is not big enough to pull me away. So I go back to core, move up to core, notice sensation of fabric. Okay, so feel that. I turn the heat up, so I've got more warmth coming into the body. That feeling of coldness is gone. I'm not so distracted by that. I'm not distracted by that little cough sensation. Now go up into the heart space. Heart space, Oh, there's some popping in the shoulder blade region, the back region. So now I'm thinking in terms of like my energetic expression. So my chest is high as I kind of lifted my chest to get kind of a broad chest feeling. I had an image of Captain America, strong, right? So I noticed that. Okay, come back. Let's move the shoulder blades around just to get a feel. Okay, bounce them a little bit. Now move up into throat, jaw space. There's that little scratchy feeling of swallowing spit down the wrong pipe. That's jaw space. There's plenty of spit in there. Swallow that down the throat. Notice that for a moment. Let's go to the top of the head, top of the spine. There's still some holding in certain spots. Just noticing that, letting that go. Oh, there's the core. Core's often sucking in. It's the thing about our will, our habits, our body. So the sucking in of the core is something that's just part of my memory, part of my habit. So I have to always kind of go back to that place and just kind of let it go, let it go, let it go. So that's squared away. I'll come back up to my head, top of the head. Now I'll put a little work into the face, soften the eyes, soften the cheeks, soften the mouth. Let's add a little bit of a smile. And let's move into bell 3. Okay, bell 3, start with breath, noticing just your baseline. Let's max it out. So now I am watching while I will my body to breathe more fully, and I'm watching what my will does to my body and how my body reacts. So by maxing out the breathing, I'm willing my breath to go maximum. And then in the max space, I'm noticing what my body's doing in the space and I'm harmonizing with it. So right now it's just mostly quiet, right? There's no turmoil, there's nothing to quell, there's nothing to calm down. There's just simply presence. So because that's the way it is, then I'm going to choose, okay, I'm going to choose to deploy just basic seated meditation, which is just sit here quietly inside this space of stillness. And I'm going to interact with the stuff that shows up because I know it's pretty quiet. I don't have to do any big shifts. I don't have to quiet anything down. I don't have to kind of move away from anything. I'm just in this space. So now I just want to interact with the subtleties of the layers themselves. I'm not fighting any layers. I'm not trying to shift my body one way or the other. I'm not trying to tame my mind. I'm just going to interact with what's there in a calm, appropriately patterned manner. So just do that for a minute. Just keeping time wise, and then we'll move on to fourth bell, which gets into this divine space part. So now we're in the fourth bell. Okay, so now our our path has led us to recognizing the outside world, using that as a way to tame the mind. Okay, from there we went into the body, which is kind of focusing on the inner world, which is guiding your attention by your will. So I used my will, my free will, the thing that I get to choose to do inside my body to calm myself down, or not so to calm myself down, but just to situate myself into the practice. Then I go into the body. In the body, there's the body can be a distraction, thoughts can be a distraction, but by using your will to focus your own attention on these certain places, you generate interaction inside the moment. Then you come to third bell. Third bell, again, is you're using your will and your breath. You're using your will to guide your breath, and you're guiding your breath based on what you are aware of. And today chose the just seated practice to complement where I am, which is in a basically pretty quiet place. And so now what I want to do is I want to tap into the divine, which is the part of me that is just love, okay? And I want to turn it up, okay? I want to turn it up. First, I'm going to turn it up in the realm of gratitude, which is I'm just going to be grateful. And essentially I'm going to invite this space, the divine space inside of me, to warm up, to light up, to become more the central focus, which is just gratitude. Gratitude is just expressions of appreciation. So, I'm so grateful for the house that I'm in. I'm so grateful for not being rained on right now. I'm so grateful that there's this space heater next to me that's keeping me warm. I'm so grateful for this meditation cushion that's right underneath me that makes it more comfortable. I'm so grateful for this little beanbag thing that's giving my right foot comfort. I'm so grateful that after this, I'm going to be able to have coffee. I'm so grateful for my family. I'm so grateful for the Washington football win. I'm just so grateful for all of my blessings. And so now, okay, I'm going to shift a little bit. As I'm saying this, I can feel it in my heart a little bit. It's warmth and light. Okay, it's not a story. I am the story that's turning the divine on. It's not me. It as much as it is there's this part of me that turns on and up with these loving kind of things, gratitude being one of them. So I've turned it on, right? So it's like a reactor, right? That's what I'm imagining. It's a divine reactor. So now I'm going to shift from gratitude to compassion, which is I have these wonderful things to be grateful for, and I'd like to share that with those that don't have it. So for all the people out there that are really, really in a dark place right now, especially the people that are really struggling with their livelihood and they're not getting the support that they should be getting. So they're dealing with a sense of moral injury. And so I know that in the warrior space, but in the civilian space, to be someone who's a first responder or someone who's a frontline worker or someone who's in a hospital area, who's just doing everything they've always done, but are now having to do it under pandemic conditions, and to not get the support that they know they should be getting. I really want to express my compassion towards them. And so I hope that my heart reaches theirs through an invisible string that connects to them, and know that they know that there are people out there that feel compassion for them, that are rooting for them, are frustrated by how things aren't going the way they are. And I just hope that you recognize that there are a lot of warriors out there that know what moral injury is, and they can help. There's a lot of research out there that's really, really good into moral injury and help people navigate this sense of frustration, borderline rage, that they can move through it. So I hope that there's an opportunity for people out there that are struggling to find that space, find the peace that they so rightly need, And I hope the best for them. Now, be intentional about the finish. So breath in, breath out, breath in, and then the second breath out finishes the practice. All right, let's read that stanza one more time, and then we'll finish up for the day. The divine does not like to be shut up in a building, right? So that's just intellect. What he means by shut up in a building is kind of man-made intellect. The divine likes to be out in the open. It's right here in this very body. Each one of us is a miniature universe, a living shrine. There's so much more to talk about that idea, and I really appreciate this morning. I haven't broken it down, the internal environment experience in relation to divinity like that before. So it's very much because of this training that I was able to kind of get to those insights. So thank you. I mean, I owe that to you all. I really do. I can't tell you how much that space inside of me lights up when I'm interacting with you all and sharing the practice with you all, and it just means the world to me. So thank you so much for the attention that you're giving this channel and these streams. So thank you. 4 more days until this year's Art of Peace practice is over. So just remember, after this week, I'm taking a week off. Anyway, hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for paying attention, and see you tomorrow. Later on, we're down.